Hi everybody, I'm Miss Karen at Adams Memorial Library, and I am here with Dandelion and Bryony, and they have a lot of yarn because that's what our stories are about this week. The ones we want to tell you about are about yarn, and a lot of them are about knitting. So Dandelion and Bryony have been knitting. They've got their yarn, they have knitting needles, they have books about knitting and yarn, so they are set. And if you are interested in knitting, we've got some books that will tell you how to knit at the library, and we have some books that'll just talk about other people knitting, so it can put you in the mood either way. But the books we have for you this week are Knitting Projects You'll Purl Over by Kelly McClure, and another instruction book called Kids Knitting Projects for Kids of All Ages. Even me, even big kids can find something to do in this book. And it's written by Melanie Falick, and the illustrations were done by Kristin and the photographs, you can see the actual kids knitting, were by Chris Hartlove. So those books talk about how you can go to a yarn store and find some yarn. If you want to start back even further, if you really want to make something from scratch, then you might want this book. It's called If You Want to Knit Some Mittens. It was written by Purdie Salas and is illustrated by Angela Matteson. And if you already know how to knit, but you just don't have enough time to do your knitting because maybe people won't really let you be, then you might want to read this book. It is called Leave Me Alone. All the old woman wants to do is be able to knit, but people keep bothering her. Leave Me Alone is written and illustrated by Vera Brosgol. And if you did like to knit, wouldn't it be nice to have a box that was always full of yarn so you never ran out? That's what happens in Extra Yarn, which was written by Barnett and the illustrations are by Jon Klassen. I'll tell you a little bit more about these. Now, if you decided you wanted to learn how to knit, we've got books to help you get started. These books talk about all the great stuff you can do. You could make hats, you can make puppets. It starts off talking about yarn and the tools you'll need, like knitting needles. And you might need some scissors, maybe even some other hooks, measuring tape, and of course yarn. But once you start, you can learn basic stitches, the knit stitch and the purl stitch. And once you learn those, you're going to be able to make all kinds of things. This book, the kids knitting book, has even more ideas of things you can do. It has instructions about how to get started and how it's got pictures so it can show you how to do the different stitches. You could also look online to see if you can find a video, if that will help you too. So between the book and the video, you'll be knitting in no time. And you could make a hat. You could make puppets. You can make a beautiful scarf to keep you warm or to give to somebody else. So that's a great thing about knitting. You can make things for yourself and you can also make things for your friends. So these books will help you get started. But as I said, if you really, really, really want to go kind of old school and do everything yourself, the first thing you will need if you want to knit mittens is a sheep. Step one is get a sheep. Seriously. Get a sheep. Take the sheep home. You need to keep her nice and warm in the winter. This is going to be sort of a long-term project. So keep her nice and warm in the winter. Give her a blanket. Take care of her. And then in the spring, you'll be able to give your sheep a haircut and get the wool. And, sometimes getting a haircut, especially a drastic one's a little startling, but it'll grow back. Don't worry about the sheep. But you want to make your mittens, so you're going to need to wash the wool because, it could be a little bit dirty. Dry the wool. And then card it to try to smooth it out a little because when it's on the sheep, it's going to be pretty curly. Don't try that on your hair, it says. And then once you have the wool sort of straightened out a little bit, you'll need a spinning wheel to spin it into yarn. And then once you have your yarn, you're just going to keep going. You can read this book and find out the rest of the steps and see how you can knit some mittens. But, you know, sometimes you just want to knit your mittens, or this woman wants to knit some sweaters. And if you have a big, big family, yeah, she just wanted to be left alone to knit. But sometimes with a big family, things get a little rambunctious, a little loud. And the old woman knows that the days are getting, it's fall already, the leaves are turning. That means winter will be coming, and all her grandchildren need sweaters, and she has to knit them, but her knitting was just not getting done. So they, too many people were too interested in her yarn there. So she decides she's going to do her chores, make some tea, put everything in a big bag, and hit the road. She yells, "Leave me alone!" And she goes off to try to find a nice, quiet place to knit. Like the forest. That should be nice and quiet until bears come. The bear cubs are very interested in the yarn, and the mama bear is very interested in keeping people away from her cubs. So that was not very peaceful. So the old woman had to say, "Leave me alone," to the bear, and bopped her in the nose, and go try to find a quieter place. So she went up to the top of the mountain, and it was great. Nobody there but goats, mountain goats. But wouldn't you know it, they were very interested in yarn too, and they were mostly interested in eating it. So she couldn't knit with that happening, so she just keep going. So is she ever going to find a nice quiet place to knit? Is she ever going to get all those sweaters done? You can check this book out from the library and find out what happens to the old woman. In this book, I have to say, this seems like a really nice box to have. There's a box. And Annabelle, who lives in this kind of dreary town, it's sort of just gray and dark, and there's just a lot of kind of soot and cinders in the air, even when it's snowing. But Annabelle finds this box, and when she opens it up, she sees it has yarn of every different color in it. So she makes herself a sweater, and it's beautiful. And then she makes a sweater for her dog Mars, too. But the strange thing is, even though she knitted those sweaters, there was still yarn in the box. So she could start knitting sweaters for everybody at school. Even the teacher. And there was still yarn in the box. So she knitted sweaters for more people, and there was still yarn in the box. So she started knitting sweaters for animals and for the houses, the birdhouses, and the mailboxes, and all the buildings. And there was still yarn in the box. Well, if you have this kind of magical box, somebody's probably going to hear about it. And eventually, the Archduke hears about it. And to be fair, he did say he would buy the box from Annabelle for, oh, look, see here, she's knitting something for a truck, keep the trucks warm in the winter. But the Archduke said he would buy it from her. He offered her $1 million, but she said, no, the box isn't for sale. She likes having this box and being able to knit for everybody. So then he says he'll give her $2 million, but she says, no, thanks. But can you guess what the Archduke does if he can't buy this box that he really wants? You guess what he does instead? Mm-hmm. You're right. He tries to steal it. And then what's going to happen to poor Annabelle? Is she going to have her box? Is she never going to be able to get it back? Come and get extra yarn from the library, and then you can find out. And if you decide you like yarn, but maybe knitting's not your thing, don't worry, because we even have a book about crocheting. Maybe you'd like to learn to crochet. This is called Crochet Projects That Will Hook You. Because you use a crochet hook with these, and it's done by Whooley. And you might have already seen some of our friends at the library know how to crochet. So if you're interested in crocheting, you can come in, you can check this book out, and you can talk to our library friends, and they'd be happy to show you what they're crocheting. So maybe you could get a new project going for the winter. You could be knitting, you could be crocheting, or you could just be reading about yarn. So please come to the library and check these books out, and please join Bryony and Dandelion and me again next week, and we'll talk about some more books. Thank you, everybody. Bye.